One small act of kindness can change more than a life. It can change the future of everyone it touches. Maria had been working at the hospital for several years, and though her days were long and tiring, she always carried herself with a quiet kindness that touched everyone around her. She had learned early on that small gestures could mean the world to someone. Whether it was holding a patient's hand while they were nervous, offering a gentle smile to someone in pain, or taking a few extra moments to listen to a worried parent. On that particular morning, she arrived early, as usual, the crisp air of the city brushing against her face as she walked briskly toward the hospital entrance. She carried with her not only her bag and supplies, but also an invisible weight. Her mother's health had been declining, and Maria had to balance her demanding job with caring for her at home. Despite the stress, she kept her heart open, always ready to help those who needed it most. As she approached the sliding glass doors, she noticed a small commotion near the entrance. A boy in a wheelchair was struggling to maneuver himself along the path. The boy looked no older than 8 or 9. There was a fragile determination in his eyes as he tried to push himself forward. His tiny hands fumbled with the wheels, and his face grew increasingly frustrated and red with the effort. Maria immediately walked toward him, her steps quick but calm. She crouched down beside him and spoke softly, introducing herself with a gentle voice that seemed to ease some of the tension in the boy's shoulders. She asked his name, and when he said it quietly, she repeated it warmly, making him feel seen and acknowledged in a way that few had. The boy hesitated, unsure, his hand still gripping the wheels. Maria didn't rush him. Instead, she asked if he wanted a little help. He nodded slightly, and she carefully positioned herself, sliding her arms under him with precision and care. Though he was heavier than she had expected, Maria lifted him effortlessly, cradling him against her chest in a manner that was both safe and comforting. The boy's body relaxed a little at the contact, and his small face broke into a shy smile. She whispered kind words to him, telling him he was doing wonderfully and that she would help him get to where he needed to go. Just as she carried him through the entrance, a man appeared from behind, hurrying in a suit that looked expensive, his expression anxious. He was speaking into a phone, but clearly noticed Maria holding the boy. He quickly ended the call and approached them, his eyes wide with surprise and relief. "Ethan," he called, his voice a mixture of concern and disbelief. The boy recognized the voice instantly and reached toward him with a delighted smile. Maria gently placed him down, careful to make the transition smooth. The man's eyes didn't leave her face as he thanked her repeatedly, but there was something more in his gaze, a mixture of curiosity and admiration. He watched how naturally she interacted with his son, how she spoke to him gently, and how she had managed to calm his frustrations in moments. Maria, sensing his observation, felt slightly self-conscious. She had done what she had always done for anyone who needed help. It wasn't anything extraordinary in her mind. Yet the man's reaction was different from what she was used to. Instead of a hurried thank you or a brief nod, he lingered, his expression softening. He introduced himself formally, and Maria learned that his name was Alexander Ward, a name that was whispered throughout the city for wealth, influence, and an almost untouchable reputation. She didn't let his status intimidate her. She simply smiled and reassured him that Ethan was a brave boy, and that she was happy to help as she walked away to her own tasks. She felt a strange warmth and sense of fulfillment. It wasn't the first time she had helped someone, but something about this encounter lingered in her mind. She thought about the boy, his resilience, and how a little kindness had made his morning better. At the same time, she sensed that her small act had made an impression on someone who lived a life very different from her own. Meanwhile,
Alexander stood still,
watching Maria move away. He was struck not only by her physical ability to handle his son so carefully, but also by the care and attention she had given. In his world, people often acted out of obligation or for recognition. But here was someone whose actions were purely driven by compassion. For the first time in a long while, he felt a quiet admiration for a stranger, a recognition of a goodness that he had almost forgotten existed in daily life. As Maria disappeared into the hospital, Alexander knelt beside his son Ethan, who was now happily chatting about the small birds outside the hospital window. Alexander felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Relief, that his son had been cared for in such a genuine way, and curiosity about the young woman who had done it. He found himself thinking that perhaps there were people in the world who could change lives in ways money never could. And maybe, just maybe, this was someone who could make a difference not only to his son, but to him as well. Maria went on with her morning, helping patients, comforting their families, and performing her duties with the same dedication as always. Yet, throughout the day, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was different. It wasn't just the gratitude of a father or the fleeting satisfaction of helping a child. It was something deeper, something that had left an imprint on both her life and unknowingly. On Alexander's, she had done a simple act of kindness, lifting a struggling boy into her arms. But that simple act had created ripples that neither of them could yet fully understand. By the time the morning shift ended, Maria was exhausted but happy. She didn't realize that this small, compassionate act had set in motion events that would eventually change her life in ways she had never dreamed possible. And for Alexander, it was a reminder that the world still held moments of true humanity. Sometimes, it only took one act, one gentle lift, one kind gesture to see it. Alexander couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had helped his son that morning. Her name, Maria, kept coming back to him in unexpected moments while he sipped his coffee, while he walked through his sprawling home. And even during meetings where his mind should have been focused on business, there was something in the way she had carried Ethan, a combination of strength and gentleness, that stayed with him. He had seen many people try to connect with his son, but most either lacked patience or treated him like a fragile object. Maria had done neither. She had treated Ethan like a child with feelings, not limitations. The next morning, Alexander found himself returning to the hospital, not because of any appointment, but because he wanted to see Maria again. He tried to appear casual, pretending he had come to check on his son's routine. But in reality, he was watching her from a distance. Maria moved among the patients with the same ease he had noticed before, her eyes constantly scanning to see who needed her attention. She had a calm authority that made everyone around her feel safe. Children responded to her naturally, parents relaxed when she was near, and even some of the anxious nurses seemed to look to her for guidance. Alexander realized that her kindness was not an act, but a part of who she was, and he found himself admiring her even more. He approached her cautiously, not wanting to startle her, and asked a few simple questions about Ethan's morning routine. Maria answered politely but professionally, explaining the therapy exercises he did and how he was improving day by day. She mentioned small things, how Ethan loved to watch birds outside, the window, and how he preferred certain songs over others. Alexander listened closely, noting how deeply she understood his son. Her observations were not just about his physical needs, but about his personality, his likes, and his moods. He realized that she was paying attention in a way he never had the time or patience to do. As the conversation continued, Alexander asked her a few personal questions, carefully and respectfully. He learned that Maria worked 2 jobs to support her mother, that she had dreams she rarely spoke about, and that she often went out of her way to help people even when it was inconvenient. He was struck by her resilience and dedication. It was rare to find someone who was so selfless, so genuinely caring, and so grounded despite life's hardships. He felt a growing curiosity about her life, wanting to know more about who she was beyond the hospital walls. Throughout the day, Alexander found himself thinking about how much Maria's presence had changed his own perspective. He had spent his life surrounded by wealth, luxury, and people who often acted out of self-interest. Yet here was someone whose life was far less comfortable, but whose heart was far richer. He realized that her kindness had made a profound impact on him, awakening emotions he had long buried under responsibilities, business decisions, and social obligations. He began to wonder if people like Maria could exist in his world, people who were not impressed by wealth or status, but who judged others by their actions and intentions. Over the next few days, Alexander found reasons to return to the hospital more often. Sometimes under the guise of checking on Ethan, sometimes just to observe Maria. He noticed how she handled difficult situations, comforting a crying child, explaining medical procedures to worried parents in simple words, and even calming staff members who were overwhelmed. Each time he watched her, he felt a mixture of admiration and something more personal, a growing respect that he had not expected to feel for someone outside his social circle. Alexander's fascination was not only about Maria's skills or her kindness, but also about her natural way of connecting with people. He saw her as a bridge between the rigid, often lonely world he inhabited and the warmth and simplicity he sometimes longed for. Her presence reminded him that life could be about more than schedules, meetings, and achievements. There was beauty in compassion, strength in patience, and power in humility. Alexander had achieved almost everything materially, but watching Maria made him realize how little he had experienced in terms of genuine human connection. One afternoon, after seeing Maria assist Ethan with a small therapy exercise, Alexander approached her again, this time more openly. He expressed his gratitude not just for the morning she had lifted Ethan, but for the care she had shown over the days that followed. Maria, ever modest, shrugged off the praise, insisting she was only doing her job. But Alexander could tell she meant more than she let on. Her eyes held sincerity, and her quiet confidence made him even more aware of the gap between her world and his own, a gap he now wanted to understand rather than bridge with money or influence. Alexander began to imagine what Maria's life must be like outside the hospital. He thought about her waking early to juggle 2 jobs, her concern for her mother's health, and the sacrifices she made daily. He realized that her struggles were immense, yet she carried herself with dignity and kindness that few could match. This contrast with his own life, where problems were often solved with money or resources, made him admire her even more. He felt an urge to do something meaningful for her, not because she had asked, but because she deserved recognition and support for her selflessness. By the end of the week, Alexander's curiosity had grown into a quiet determination. He wanted to learn more about Maria's life, her dreams, her challenges, and her motivations. He felt a desire to connect with her in a way that went beyond the hospital walls. To understand the person who had shown such unwavering kindness to his son. For the first time in a long while, he felt that his influence and resources could be used to make a real difference in someone else's life, not as a display of power, but as a genuine act of gratitude. Maria, meanwhile, remained unaware of the depth of Alexander's attention. She continued her work with the same dedication, focusing on each patient, each family, and each task with care and empathy. She didn't seek recognition, nor did she expect her actions to have consequences beyond the immediate moment. But little did she know, her simple act of kindness, lifting a struggling child into her arms, had begun to create ripples that would reach far beyond the hospital doors, quietly shaping the future of not just herself, but the billionaire who had noticed her heart. As Alexander left the hospital one evening, watching Maria speak gently to a young boy and laughing softly at his jokes, he felt a mixture of admiration, hope, and a desire to act. He knew that people like her were rare and precious, and he wondered if he could find a way to become a part of her world, not through wealth or status, but through trust, respect, and shared care for the child who had brought them together. The thought lingered in his mind as he drove away, a quiet anticipation that something significant was about to unfold. A week had passed since Alexander had first noticed Maria's kindness toward his son, Ethan, and during that time, he had thought about her constantly. He realized that he didn't just want to observe her from a distance. Anymore, he wanted to reach out in a way that could truly make a difference in her life. Alexander was a man used to having control over situations, and he knew that offering help could change someone's life, but he also wanted to be careful. He wanted the gesture to be meaningful and not overwhelming. With that in mind, he called his personal assistant and arranged for Maria to meet him privately. Under the pretense of discussing Ethan's care in more detail, Maria
received the call while she was finishing a long shift at the hospital.
She was surprised and slightly hesitant when she heard Alexander's request for a meeting. She knew he was the billionaire whose son she had helped, but she had never imagined that he would remember her or want to speak with her personally. Her mind raced with questions. Was he going to offer her money? Was this some kind of misunderstanding? Maria had always been cautious around people of wealth and influence. They often acted differently, expecting things in return. She felt a mix of curiosity and nervousness, but finally decided to go. After all, it was about Ethan, a child she cared deeply for. The meeting took place in a quiet, private room that was warm and welcoming, unlike the intimidating spaces she had imagined in Alexander's mansion. He greeted her with a polite smile, and Maria, maintaining her professionalism, returned it. For a few moments, they exchanged polite small talk about Ethan's progress and routine. But soon Alexander spoke with sincerity that caught her off guard. He thanked her for the way she had treated Ethan, explaining that his son rarely warmed to strangers and often resisted help. "What you did that morning," he said, "was more than just helping him. You made him feel safe, valued, and understood. That is rare, Maria." Maria felt a mix of pride and humility. She had never seen her actions as extraordinary. She had simply done what felt right. She explained that every child deserved patience and kindness, and that she had been happy to help Ethan. Alexander listened intently, nodding, clearly moved by her words. The atmosphere in the room was calm, but charged with unspoken understanding. He wasn't just admiring her actions. He was recognizing the depth of her character, something that no wealth or status could imitate. Then, Alexander made a surprising proposal. He offered Maria a position as Ethan's personal caregiver. The job came with a salary far beyond what she was earning at the hospital and offered flexible hours so she could manage her own life and her mother's needs. He explained that the role would not be simple babysitting. It would involve closely working with Ethan on his daily routines, therapy exercises, and emotional support. Alexander assured her that she would receive all the training she needed and that he wanted someone he could trust completely with his son's care, someone who had already shown the qualities he valued most. Maria was stunned. She had never imagined that helping a child could lead to such an opportunity. She thought about the stability this job could bring, the ability to support her mother more easily, and the chance to make a real difference in Ethan's life on a daily basis. But at the same time, fear crept in. The idea of stepping into the private world of a billionaire was intimidating. What if she didn't meet expectations? What if she failed? Maria had spent most of her life working quietly, never seeking attention or recognition, and now she was being offered something she had never dreamed of. Alexander, sensing her hesitation, spoke gently. "I don't want this to feel like pressure," he said. "I only want someone who genuinely cares for Ethan, someone who can be a part of his life and help him grow. I've seen how you interact with him, and it's clear that you understand him in a way that no one else does. I don't just want you to do a job. I want you to be part of his life in a meaningful way." His words made Maria pause and think. She realized that this was not just a job offer, but a vote of confidence in her character and her abilities. It was a rare acknowledgement that someone of influence saw her as more than her background, more than her struggles, and more than her position in the world. This recognition, coming from Alexander, made her heart swell with a mix of gratitude, pride, and cautious hope. Over the next few days, Maria spoke with her mother and close friends, weighing the decision carefully. She thought about what it would mean to leave her hospital job, the adjustment of entering a wealthy household, and the potential for personal growth. At the same time, she considered the impact she could have on Ethan's life, helping him develop confidence and independence while providing the warmth and care he deserved. Each time she thought about the boy's bright smile and trusting eyes, her resolve strengthened. Finally, Maria made the decision. She accepted Alexander's offer, realizing that it was more than just employment. It was an opportunity to make a lasting difference. She contacted his assistant to confirm, her voice steady, despite the nervous excitement she felt inside. When Alexander received her response, he was quietly pleased. He had seen the hesitation in her eyes, but had also recognized the strength of her character. Her acceptance meant more than filling a role. It meant forming a bond built on trust, respect, and genuine care. Her first day in the new role was a mixture of nerves and wonder. The household was unlike anything she had experienced: spacious rooms, elegant furniture, and a quiet order that spoke of wealth and discipline. Yet what caught her attention the most was Ethan, waiting for her with a small smile that lit up his face. Maria knelt beside him, speaking softly and offering reassurance as she had done countless times before. Ethan's reaction, his laughter, his ease, and his excitement to show her his drawings reminded her why she had accepted the job. Alexander watched from a distance. Quietly noting how naturally Maria interacted with his son, he could see that she was not performing a role. She was genuinely present, fully engaged, and giving Ethan the attention and affection he needed. For Alexander, the sense of relief was profound. He realized that Maria's presence would change not only his son's life, but also the dynamic of their family. He felt a growing respect and gratitude toward her, knowing that finding someone like Maria was rare. As the days passed, Maria adapted to the new environment. She learned the routines, the therapy schedules, and the small details that made Ethan comfortable and happy. She grew more confident in her abilities, finding joy in small victories. A new word learned to smile when he accomplished a task, or the quiet pride in his eyes when she encouraged him. The role was challenging, but it was deeply rewarding, and Maria felt a sense of purpose that surpassed anything she had experienced before. Meanwhile, Alexander found himself reflecting on the ways Maria had changed the household. Her presence brought warmth, patience, and emotional intelligence that had been missing. The atmosphere became lighter, more relaxed, and more genuine. He realized that her impact went beyond her care for Ethan. She was bringing a sense of humanity and compassion into their lives, reminding him of the value of simple kindness in a world often driven by money and power. Maria's acceptance of the job also opened new doors for her. She was offered access to training programs, therapy workshops, resources that allowed her to improve her skills and expand her knowledge. Alexander insisted on supporting her growth, not as a favor, but because he believed in her potential. Maria began to see a future she had never imagined, a life where she could combine her compassion with opportunity, where her hard work could be recognized and rewarded without losing her integrity. By the end of the first month, the bond between Maria and Ethan had strengthened. She knew his moods, his fears, and his joys. She became an integral part of his life, someone he could rely on, and someone who could bring out the best in him. Alexander observed this bond with quiet admiration, understanding that Maria's influence on his son was profound and irreplaceable. The experience also began to change Maria. She felt more confident, empowered, and valued. The financial stability, the respect she received, and the meaningful connection with Ethan transformed her outlook on life. She began to dream bigger, to hope more, and to believe that her kindness could create opportunities she had never imagined before. Maria's life had begun to change in ways she never could have imagined. After accepting the position as Ethan's personal caregiver, she stepped into a world that was unfamiliar, but full of possibilities. Every morning, she arrived at the house with a sense of purpose, knowing that her presence would make a real difference in Ethan's day. She greeted him with a warm smile, and he responded with laughter and excitement that brightened the room. The bond between them had grown quickly. He trusted her completely, and she had become not just a caregiver, but a friend, a teacher, and a steady presence in his life. The household itself was different from anything Maria had known. It was large and luxurious, but it was not cold or intimidating. Instead, it felt ordered, calm, and welcoming. She quickly learned the routines from therapy sessions to meals to quiet playtime, and adapted to the rhythm of life in a home where precision mattered, but kindness came first. At first, she had been nervous, unsure how to navigate this world of wealth and privilege. But she soon realized that the most important thing was not wealth, but the care and attention she could give Ethan. She focused on him, on his needs, and on helping him grow. And that focus allowed her to feel confident despite the unfamiliar surroundings. Alexander watched her closely during those first weeks. He had been cautious, unsure if hiring someone from outside his social world could truly work. But Maria surprised him every day. She was patient, attentive, and deeply compassionate. She could sense Ethan's moods, calm him when he was frustrated, and celebrate small victories with genuine joy. Alexander noticed the way his son's confidence was slowly increasing. how he was attempting new tasks with encouragement from Maria, and how his laughter became more frequent. Maria was transforming Ethan's world, and in doing so, she was changing his as well. Maria herself began to see changes within herself. She felt empowered in ways she hadn't expected. Working with Ethan gave her a sense of accomplishment that went beyond financial stability or recognition. She had responsibility, yes, but she also had the freedom to shape a child's growth and happiness, something that filled her with pride and purpose. The more she worked with Ethan, the more she realized that her kindness and patience were making tangible differences. She could see the impact in the way he smiled, the way he tried new things, and the small moments of joy that they shared together. Alexander began to interact with Maria in a different way as well. He had always been a private man, accustomed to people who flattered him or sought favors. But Maria treated him with respect and honesty. She did not act differently because of his wealth. She simply did her job with sincerity. This authenticity intrigued him. He started sharing small details about Ethan's progress, asking for her advice on ways to support him at home, and even discussing minor household decisions where Ethan's routine was involved. Over time, their conversations became less formal and more genuine. Alexander found that he looked forward to Maria's insights and her thoughtful approach. Ethan's progress was remarkable. With Maria's guidance, he learned to perform tasks he had previously struggled with, gained confidence in social interactions, and developed new interests that his parents encouraged. Maria celebrated every small achievement with him, from learning a new word to finishing a puzzle, and Alexander noticed how these victories lifted both their spirits. Maria's dedication had created an environment where Ethan felt safe to explore, fail, and try again, something he had rarely experienced before. The household became warmer, filled with laughter, encouragement, and shared joy. Maria's influence extended beyond Ethan. She began to build quiet connections with the household staff, offering kind words and support without ever being condescending. Her warmth and humility made everyone feel respected, and soon even the more reserved staff members started to open up. She noticed small problems and helped resolve them with a gentle approach, gaining their trust and respect. Maria's presence had a ripple effect, spreading calm and positivity throughout the home. Despite the comfort and support of her new role, Maria never forgot her past struggles. She continued to care for her mother, managing the household responsibilities with careful planning and determination. The stability of her new job allowed her to balance both worlds, the high-profile household of a billionaire and her modest home life. She found strength in her dual responsibilities. Feeling that she was finally achieving a balance she had long sought as months passed, Maria grew more confident and independent. She realized that her work with Ethan was shaping her own skills, not just professionally but personally. She had developed patience, leadership, and a calm decisiveness that surprised her. She was no longer just a caregiver. She was a vital part of Ethan's growth and a trusted partner in the household. Alexander, who had initially been cautious, began to rely on her judgment in ways that surprised him. He respected her opinions and valued her presence, not only for what she did, but for who she was. There were small, quiet moments that solidified the bond between Maria and Alexander. Sometimes she would catch him watching Ethan with a soft smile, or she would notice him observing the way she guided his son through a difficult task. There was a silent acknowledgement between them, an understanding of trust and mutual respect that did not need words. Alexander recognized that Maria's influence went far beyond her role. She had become someone who brought light, stability, and care into a world that often felt rigid and lonely. Maria also began to dream of a future she had not allowed herself to imagine before. With financial stability, professional growth, and a sense of purpose, she could think about her own goals. She started considering ways to further her education, to expand her skills, and to continue helping children like Ethan. The confidence she gained from this role spilled into her personal life, giving her courage to face challenges she had previously avoided. She realized that her kindness and dedication had opened doors she had never expected, and she began to embrace the possibilities. Ethan's laughter, his trust in her, and the joy she saw in his progress became her motivation. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities for growth. She celebrated the small victories with him, comforted him during setbacks, and guided him with a patient hand. Alexander, observing from a distance, was amazed at the transformation in his son. He realized that Maria's presence had done more than improve Ethan's confidence. It had brought warmth, joy, and stability to their home. By the end of the first year, Maria had fully adjusted to her role. She'd become a trusted member of the household, a mentor and friend to Ethan, and someone Alexander relied on without hesitation. Her influence had brought balance and happiness to a household that had once felt distant and formal. She had earned respect through her dedication, kindness, and unwavering commitment, proving that her actions had the power to change lives in ways that went far beyond money or status. Maria understood that her journey was not just about employment. It was about impact, growth, and connection. She had stepped into an unfamiliar world, brought light to a child's life, and in doing so, transformed her own. She had created a space of trust and care where love and patience thrived. And she realized that this was just the beginning of a future filled with possibilities. Not only for Ethan, but for herself as well. Months had passed since Maria had stepped into Alexander's world, and her life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. The once cautious young woman, who had balanced 2 jobs and cared for her mother with quiet resilience, now moved with confidence and purpose. Her days were still filled with responsibilities, but they were richer, fuller, and deeply meaningful. Every morning she greeted Ethan with the same warmth that had sparked their first connection, and he ran to her, his laughter filling the rooms that once felt formal and distant. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, rooted in trust, care, and shared moments of joy and discovery. Ethan's progress was remarkable. Maria had guided him through exercises, taught him small daily routines, and encouraged him to explore new activities. Alexander watched as his son developed a confidence and independence that had been missing before Maria arrived. There were moments when Ethan would look at Maria with a bright smile, proudly showing her a new drawing or a word he had learned. Her encouragement was gentle but firm, and it gave him the courage to try things he had previously avoided. Alexander realized that her presence had done more than help his son physically or emotionally. She had given him hope, happiness, and a sense of security that money alone could never provide. For Maria, the transformation went beyond her professional role. She had grown in ways she had never expected. The job had given her stability, allowing her to provide better care for her mother, to plan for the future, and to finally dream about possibilities that had once seemed unreachable. She had developed skills she hadn't realized she possessed: patience, insight, leadership, and the ability to navigate complex situations with grace. Her confidence had grown, and she began to believe in herself in a way she had never done before. The life she had once only imagined was slowly becoming real. Alexander, too, had been affected by Maria's presence. He had always been a man of wealth and influence, used to solving problems with money or power, but Maria's sincerity and care had touched him in ways he had never expected. He admired her not only for what she did for Ethan, but for who she was: humble, strong, kind, and unwaveringly compassionate. Her presence reminded him that true value was not measured in wealth, status, or accomplishments, but in the heart and character of a person. He found himself relying on her judgment, trusting her instincts, and appreciating the subtle ways she had enriched their household. The relationship between Maria and Alexander was one of quiet understanding and mutual respect. They did not need constant conversation to communicate. A glance, a shared smile, or observing her interactions with Ethan often spoke volumes. Alexander realized that Maria's influence extended beyond his son. She had brought warmth and humanity into their home, bridging the gap between the structured, sometimes lonely world he lived in and the joyful, caring environment she created. It was clear to him that she was indispensable, not because of her role alone, but because of the way she transformed their lives simply by being herself. Maria also began to embrace her personal growth. With the stability of her job and the support from Alexander, she explored opportunities to improve her skills and expand her knowledge. She attended workshops, learned more about child development, and even considered future studies that could help her support other children. Ethan, her work with him became more than a job. It became a calling, a chance to make a lasting impact. She realized that her kindness, patience, and dedication had opened doors that she had never imagined, and she embraced the possibilities with enthusiasm and hope. There were quiet moments in the household that spoke volumes about the bond they had all formed. Sometimes Maria would find Alexander watching Ethan with a gentle, proud smile, and she would notice the subtle relief and gratitude in his eyes. Other times, she observed him quietly appreciating how she guided his son through a challenge or celebrated a small victory. These moments created an unspoken connection between them, a recognition of trust, respect, and shared care. They both understood that their lives had been touched profoundly by simple acts, her lifting Ethan, her kindness, and the way she had become an anchor in their lives. Maria's family life had also improved. With the security of her position, she could provide better support for her mother and plan for their future. The stress that had weighed heavily on her shoulders eased, replaced by a sense of stability and hope. She could now focus on her dreams alongside her responsibilities, imagining a life where she could continue to help children, grow professionally, and build a future she had once only hoped for. Her compassion and hard work had brought real, tangible change to her own life. Just as it had for Ethan and Alexander, the household itself had been transformed by Maria's presence. Laughter, patience, and gentle guidance filled the rooms, replacing the formality and distance that had existed before. Ethan thrived, Alexander felt more at ease, and the staff responded to Maria's calm, positive influence. Small routines became joyful, small achievements became celebrated victories, and the home became a place of warmth, connection, and growth. Maria had not just adapted to their world. She had improved it with her presence, turning it into a space where love and trust flourished. Alexander began to reflect on what Maria had brought into their lives. He realized that her impact was far greater than he had imagined. She had given Ethan confidence, happiness, and a sense of security. She had brought warmth and calm to a household that had often felt rigid and distant, and she had reminded him of the value of true human connection, something that no amount of wealth could buy. Alexander understood that Maria had changed their lives as much as they had changed hers, in fact, perhaps even more profoundly, for Maria. The most meaningful change was the realization that her small act of kindness, lifting a struggling child into her arms, had led to this incredible journey. She had stepped into a world she never expected, grown in ways she had not imagined, found a sense of purpose, confidence, and belonging. She understood that her compassion, dedication, and patience were her greatest strengths, and that they had created opportunities she could never have achieved through effort alone. The future she had once dreamed of was now unfolding before her eyes, and it was filled with hope, possibility, and joy. As the years went by, Maria continued to nurture Ethan, supporting his growth and celebrating his successes. Alexander continued to rely on her guidance, appreciating the rare combination of skill, care, and humanity she brought to their lives. Together, they created a home where love, respect, and trust flourished, a place where a child could thrive, where a family could feel whole, and where Maria could finally see the power of her own kindness reflected in the lives she touched. Through this journey, Maria realized that one simple, selfless act had changed everything. A moment of care had grown into a life filled with meaning, connection, and opportunity. Alexander understood that meeting Maria had altered his perspective on life, family, and human kindness. And Ethan, the child at the heart of it all, had found confidence, love, and joy because someone believed in him, nurtured him, and saw him for who he truly was. In the end, their lives were forever intertwined. Maria had lifted more than just a child that morning. She had lifted hope, trust, and possibility. Alexander had opened his world not just to her, but to the warmth, love, and humanity she brought. And together, they had created a future that none of them could have imagined alone, a future built on compassion, care, and the quiet, powerful change that comes from a single act of kindness.